It was in the early 7th century that the Great Islamic Conquest began. The quarreling tribes of Arabia came together and were united under Islam. They conquered the Arabian Peninsula and then were able to push back both the Byzantine and the Persian empires. Within 100 years, the Caliphate expanded to encompass a land area that stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indus River Valley. In the year 711, a Berber general named Tariq ibn Ziyad crossed from North Africa into the Iberian Peninsula. He was at the head of a relatively small force of approximately 7,000 Berber cavalry. What was once the Roman province of Hispania was now mostly under the control of the Visigoth kingdom. They had settled in the peninsula during the final years of the Western Roman Empire. However, the kingdom was divided as internal factions fought for dominance. A new king by the name of Roderic had come to power, but he did not have the loyalty of his nobility. King Roderic was far to the north besieging another city when the Berber force arrived. He mobilized his troops to engage this new threat and began to march south. Tariq, seeing the Visigoth army headed his way, called to his superior for reinforcements. The governor of Africa, Musa ibn Nusayr, deployed another 5,000 soldiers. This would bring the Muslim fighting strength to approximately 12,000, but the Visigoth would still outnumber them by over 2 to 1. In July of the year 711, the two forces would meet at what would be known as the Battle of Guadalete. Despite being outnumbered, Tariq and his men were united and motivated, whereas Roderic's men were mostly raw recruits and quite disloyal. It proved to be an incredibly intense engagement, but when the dust had finally settled, the Visigoth army was destroyed and Roderic was dead. This defeat politically decapitated the Visigoth kingdom, preventing a meaningful counterattack and crippling Visigoth resistance. Taking advantage of this, Tariq moved quickly and took the city of Écija. And when very little opposition was encountered, he decided to divide his forces in order to seize more objectives. He sent one contingent to take the city of Córdoba and another to secure the port cities to the east. Tariq led the lion's share of his army and moved on to capture the Visigoth capital, Toledo. Upon capturing the city, he was not only able to establish a new base of operations, but was also able to secure the kingdom's treasury. Tariq ibn Ziyad had managed to turn a raid into a war of conquest and had made himself incredibly rich in the process. This, of course, didn't go unnoticed. The next year, he was reinforced again. This time, the governor of Africa, Musa ibn Nusayr, came personally along with another 18,000 troops. Together, these two men captured the rest of the Guadalquivir River basin before expanding outward. Over the next few years, a vast majority of the Iberian Peninsula would fall to Islamic forces. Some cities like Murcia would surrender via diplomatic means, whereas others like Zaragoza had to be taken by assault. Eventually, the two commanders managed to even cross the Pyrenees and capture lands in southern France. However, news of their success by this point had reached Damascus. The Caliph grew concerned, and perhaps rightfully so, that Musa ibn Nusayr and Tariq ibn Ziyad at his side would attempt to carve out their own independent kingdom. Both men were recalled east to the capital of the Caliphate, where according to accounts they met rather unfortunate ends. The Iberian Peninsula was now the newest province of the Caliphate and would be known as Al-Andalus. Administrators who were strategically placed began to vigorously enforce laws on their new populace, but their jurisdiction did have bounds, as there were parts of the peninsula that were not entirely subjugated. Far to the north in the protective range of the Cantabrian Mountains was a new home for those who resisted. It was a harsh land where there was little infrastructure and few urban centers. Ironically, this was one of the reasons that prevented it from being overrun. The Roman roads in the rest of Hispania proved to be a boon for the Islamic conquest. Instead, the forces of the Caliphate would resort to just simply raiding the north, but very much like the Roman Empire that preceded it, Islamic forces would never be able to fully subjugate it. It was here that a nobleman came to power. According to some, he was a cousin to the fallen King Roderic. He was known as Pelagius, or in Spanish, Pelayo, and around him the fighting forces of the north began to rally. Later chroniclers tell the tale of a battle that Pelayo would be involved in. The details of the battle are not clearly known. By some accounts it occurred in the year 718, by others they specify 722. Even the fighting strength reported on both sides vary widely. However, what is known is that Pelayo, from his base in the heart of the Cantabrian Mountains, had begun to raid Muslim outposts along the frontier. These raids in time became only bolder, and the number of Pelayo's soldiers continued to grow. As a consequence, the administrators of Al-Andalus could not afford to ignore him for long. Eventually, an Umayyad fighting force was assembled and sent to put down the rebels. It was led by two commanders, Al-Qamah and Munuza. Pelayo, who was outnumbered according to all accounts, refused to engage his opponent in the open field. Instead, he kept his men reined in within the confines of the high passes. Growing ever more frustrated with their lack of progress, Al-Qamah and Munuza decided to pursue Pelayo into the mountains. The Muslim army was thus led deep into the steep valleys of the Cantabrian range. Near the village of Covadonga, Pelayo decided to make his stand. Al-Qamah sent out an envoy to demand Pelayo's surrender, but the envoy was promptly rejected. The Umayyad commander now had no other choice but to order an attack. His force went headlong deeper into the steep pass. They had no idea that they were marching into a trap. When the Muslim force had fully engaged themselves, Pelayo revealed his ambush. His men came out of their concealment, some even emerging from a cave. They unleashed one deadly volley of arrows after another, which managed to stagger the Umayyad host. Seeing his enemy's cohesion begin to falter, Pelayo ordered his men into a full attack. He even led a charge directly into the front of the Muslim line. The surprise of the attack was a force multiplier, and soon Al-Qamah found himself ordering a retreat. But by then it was too late. His men were in disarray and under assault, seemingly from all sides. Al-Qamah died alongside many of his men. Only a handful made it back to report what had happened. Depending on the source, the tale of the aftermath of this battle is told very differently. Some sources have it down as a great victory, with the field littered with Muslim dead. Other chronicles say it was nothing more than a skirmish. However, what is for certain is that Pelayo would go on to win more victories against the Umayyad Caliphate. Men would join his ranks in ever-increasing numbers, and his power base would continue to grow. In time, this power base would give rise to the Kingdom of Asturias, which would be established in the heart of the Cantabrian Mountains. Pelayo would be her first king, and the Reconquista, that is, the reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula, would begin.